we don't all, I mean, none of us is for everybody, right?
Yeah. Nor should we be.
And exactly.
Tonya, welcome to Biz Buddy Chat, all about threads.
Thanks for having me.
Are you ready to spill the tea and dish the dish on all the gossip that's been happening?
Sure. And as long as we can first acknowledge that Threads has been a thing for one whole week.
One
So,
whole week. Yes, it has been a thing for one whole week, and we're gonna download all the patterns that we've been seeing that we discuss
mm-hmm.
as biz buddies that has helped us figure out how to navigate it. We've both had some
Yeah.
pretty big aha moments.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, my hope here is that in this conversation, what people can get out of it is not just how you debrief current events with a biz buddy,
Yeah.
but also how you evaluate what makes sense to try out and not.
Yes, I so agree because the rule still applies. You
Mm-hmm.
can't be everywhere all at the same time. You can't. You've
No.
kind of got to pick your thing. And you and I both, well, it's funny. I'm a big Instagram user. That's actually
Mm-hmm.
not your first choice platform.
No, I'm a Facebook first person.
Yeah.
I used to be Twitter first, but things changed over there.
Well, speaking of Le Twitters, I mean, that's the whole reason that Threads got pushed out as early as it
Mm-hmm.
did. I sent a bunch of articles to my community last week because for me, the tech person, I always want to know
Mm-hmm.
like why the software release now. I knew something was a little different, not off, but different. I was
Yeah.
like, they had publicly stated that they were going to release it on the 6th. Then it suddenly gets released on the 5th. And even that was
Mm-hmm.
premature compared to previous buzz that had been going on. And there was a great podcast that I shared with you from The
Mm-hmm.
Verge. We both listened to that. And they were talking about how because our dear friend Elon decided to say, now you have to pay to play even more. Meta decided to just like jump on that open, it was a very big
Mm-hmm.
open window. And they were like, let's release it. They knew that a lot of their basic functions would not be ready on time. But the way that they did it, as a former software person, the way that they did it was really quite excellent. It could have been
Well,
a hot mess, and it was not.
I mean, not only that, so as somebody who has, managed like implementation projects before involving software, that was gutsy. It could have gone so wrong.
So wrong.
And like in the grand scheme of things, it went really well. Now, I will say, I have felt like the early adopters have been extraordinarily gracious with all the things. And I think it's because Meta was so transparent about the fact that like we didn't plan to launch right now, but we're launching right now because we see a huge need. And so we
Yeah.
want to provide people a place to come, right? And so
Yeah.
yeah, we get it. It's half baked and we totally know that and we have a list that we're going to work through, but there's no reason not to let you guys all on here and then you guys can tell us what to fix first.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that transparency is always, I think, your best first approach.
Hmm.
Anytime you're doing something big and things could go sideways, is just to be as honest as you possibly can and to then acknowledge the fact that, hey, we all can co-create together.
Yes. And from a biz buddy side, because we're really trying to let people in on like
Mm-hmm.
what actually happens in our private
Right.
spaces that they're not hanging out with us all the time. They don't see it. And what happened was I have an iPhone, you have an Android. It doesn't sound like that would be a big deal, but in the case of this, it was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
I had an alert on my phone for the Apple App Store to let me know when the app was ready for release so that
Mm-hmm.
I can download it. And I was on an end of the day meeting doing work that I do. and everything started, my watch buzzes, the phone buzzes, like
Yeah.
I was ready. And you and I had already kind of been trading voice notes up to this point. We were just mildly chatting about it,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't like a thing. And I was like, oh, I have time. Like, let me download this app. And so I downloaded and I'm in it. And all of a sudden I'm thrust into it. And I started sending you
Mm-hmm.
some screenshots, and it had the ability at that moment. I don't even remember how this happened. And I sent you, like, it's like refer your friends. And I sent you the direct link through WhatsApp. And at that point, which is another meta property, which is hilarious. But
Mm-hmm.
and then like a couple hours later, you were able to get on. And
Mm-hmm.
from then on, because the name of the game was chatter. It was
Yeah.
conversation. It was OG AOL chat room meets OG Twitter, and everyone.
Meets every 12-year-old pun you could ever
Oh,
imagine.
it was so bad. It
Was
was
so
so
good.
bad. People were like trying to be stand-up comedians. It was horrible. And we just started tagging each other. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really important to point something like that out to our people who pay attention to this conversation
Mm-hmm.
that we have going on. And because to have a biz buddy is one thing, but to like impromptu style collaborate together in the moment is where a lot of
Mm-hmm.
this power is at.
Right.
So like there were some comments on our last video. People were like, maybe you guys should like do a matchmaking service. And I had comments from people and they're like, but how do I find like somebody to whatever? And it's all in our behaviors. You and I really started picking up the pace on our collaborative behaviors together over the last, I don't know, 6 to 10 months or so,
Yeah.
because we really noticed like every time I show up, you show up. And every time you show up, I show up.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this unspoken reciprocity. I don't have to ask for it all the time. You're just like, that's my friend. I'm gonna plug her, and
Yep.
that behavior showed up. It's like I didn't have to wait for you to get onto threads before you start.
Mm-mm.
No, like I've have a lot of other biz buddies in from the whole spectrum of late coming on to like still not on. And that's fine. We collaborate in other areas, but in this case, there are a lot of people who are like, how do I like get seen more? And it's like, well, you gotta have somebody like saying, hey, come on. It's like going to a networking event and somebody saying, hey, do you want to come chat in this little group?
Right. Well, and the thing is first of all, that tactic works on every platform. So
Yeah.
people need to be aware of that. It's including people in the conversation. That is part of like how we're humans in the natural sense of being humans.
Yeah.
Like I would forward, if somebody sent me an interesting email that I thought you would enjoy, I would forward it to you. Right.
Mhm.
But it would be weird to respond to them and say, oh my gosh, my friend Mary really needs to hear this. But in the online space, I could read something, comment on it, and then say, like, oh my gosh, I could tag you and say, Mary, you have to read this. This is exactly what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And in other cases, I might quote share it, right? And then just say, hey, Mary and I were talking about this the other day. It depends on context, but both of us got much wider circles early on threads because we were including each other in the conversations as we moved about this space.
Yeah. It boosted visibility all around because unbeknownst to us at the time, um, I mean, almost it really isn't a whole lot of an algorithm, especially at the beginning. People were like,
Mm.
what is the algorithm? Because we're so trained to be like, what's the algorithm and what do I need to do to make it happy? What do I do to feed
Mm-hmm.
it? And there really wasn't one. And it was like, but if somebody was active with you, you would keep showing up, you would keep popping up in the feed.
Mm-hmm.
And because we kept like tagging each other or sharing something or commenting or liking, it
Mm-hmm.
kept popping up in the feed. And I thought that was a really important biz buddy lesson
Mm-hmm.
in this context. Um, the other thing that I thought was real interesting was just the way the culture reset itself on there.
Yes.
You have a very interesting, you were like, I have an observation, I have an aha moment. So I'm just gonna like just plop that there because I know and you were sharing things with me because there were people where I was like, nope, I'm tuning you out. I even posted
Mm-hmm.
a post at one point where I was like, I don't use the mute feature. Like either I'm following you or I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And people who I do follow in other places and they came onto threads and they were just like selling their sham wow. doing an infomercial. And I was like, unfollow. And I was like, I don't care how well I know you. I don't care
Mm-hmm.
how big a name you are. I don't care how much I ordinarily would want to impress you so I could get in front of your audience. Like, I don't care. And you, wrong party, wrong room.
Right.
Like, no.
Right. Well, and the thing is, I mean, that was kind of the energy. And I know you and me have both emailed our, like we've sent newsletters out about this topic already.
Yeah.
But, that early first 24 hours energy was very much, we have an opportunity to make this
Yes.
unlike everything else out there, but we all have to behave.
Yes.
And people were saying, like, let's just, like, this is fun. It is fun to make mistakes and enjoy this experience just for the sake of enjoying it. And then other people would say, well, eventually, there's going to be monetization attached to this platform. And, once monetization happens, it all goes south. And so we were all having these great organic conversations. And there were a lot of people who I follow on Instagram who are marketers who even said, like, here's the deal. If I see you doing the same pitchy stuff you're doing over on Instagram here, I'm going to unfollow you. I'm blocking you because I'm on Instagram. I get that over there. I want to see a different side of you here. And then we saw the people who were, like, I'm only like playing around with this right now. Pretty soon I'm just going to share repurposed content because I can't juggle one more platform.
Mm-hmm.
I bring that up because I think everybody watching yet again needs a reminder that none of us can be all the places all the time.
No.
Right. We all have to
yeah.
figure out that practical versus ideal. Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, like, there was so much FOMO in the world over the past 7 days because we're recording this. Yeah, it has been a full week now.
Mm-hmm.
There was so much FOMO in the world about like not being on there. I saw some people finally pile in. And then they just lurked and watched,
Mm-hmm.
they're just watching. And it's like, if you're gonna be in it, you've got to participate in it. That's one thing. I saw and talked with people before we both, in the middle of this week, by the way, people need to know, we actually finally met in person in LA because I recorded for the podcast and you're a guest on it and we recorded in person. So
Mm-hmm.
that happened in the middle of this whole week too. So many things this week. So we use that to our advantage too.
Mm-hmm.
FYI.
Right.
We planned, we were like, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
let's do this when we're there. So, I talked with some people before going to LA and they were like, oh yeah, I heard about this thing. And they're just like, hashtag so overwhelmed. Can't, no. Ugh. But
Right.
there was still this degree of FOMO. And they're like, but tell me what's going on in there. And I'm like, well, then just get on in there. Go
Yeah,
find
just
out.
give it a look.
But what I really want to know is about the observation you had, because you identified 3 people.
Mm-hmm.
One of which was just the most spectacular public flop.
Right. And the other two, surprisingly not so, though they all have equally large audiences. So, and I'll preface this by saying I've never seen any of these people in real life. Okay. So it's not like we're like super besties here and that like we come over and have coffee with each other. But they are all people I have been in their ecosystem for several years. So I see how they do business. I see how they operate. So we've got Katya Varbanova, right? So live stream Katya back in the day, who has a program of Canva template membership sort of thing. Then we've got Lizzie Goddard, who some people may know of as Elizabeth Goddard, but she's kind of like the queen of like low ticket offers, and she just launches stuff and see what happens, and it's amazing. And then we have Jenna Kutcher, who most people know as a social media influencer and social media expert. And so what was interesting is I got to watch all of these people come onto the platform in real time. And Katya came right out of the gate doing the same kind of stuff that she does all the time. She's always an early adopter, and she's always like, I'll tell you exactly how to go viral on this brand new platform. Follow me to go viral, buy my thing to go viral. I can help you go viral. That's what I do. That's my job. And she landed on, immediately started doing that. And nobody really said anything against her on it. Then you saw Lizzie Goddard get on there, and Lizzie was in the middle of a launch. So she came on there and she was like, oh, I'm here. And, her first post was like, and by the way, I'm in the middle of a launch for this thing. So I'm going to be talking about that here. And then you had Jenna Kutcher, who came on and initially was behaving like everybody else, right? So like, hey, is this thing on? And let me tell you about this cool thing my kids did. Da, da, da. Meanwhile, you and I have seen everybody is talking about like, let's keep this non-salesy, non-spammy. Then Jenna creates a post that says something along the lines like, not to spoil the vibe here, but would anybody be interested in hearing some marketing tips from me? Like, I can't help myself. And when I encountered that post, I was like, ugh, there was like 561 comments on it. And I was like, ugh,
There's thousands of comments on it now.
already. I was like, already. And there was, so the way that Threads works, for those who don't know, you'll see the post and then you might see one or two of the comments if they're from people you follow. You won't see all of them though, right? So I saw one that was just like, read the room, block. And I was like, well, I wonder what the other people said, because I had been expanding the comments on Katya's post and on Lizzie's post, right? So I was seeing kind of what the responses they were getting. So I checked out Jenna's, and like, I did not find, there was not one yes, please in all 561. In fact, when I checked it the next day, I found one person who was like, yeah, I'd be interested in that.
I did.
But everybody.
After you sent it to me, it was thousands. Yeah. I think she was well over 2,500 comments or something at that point. And I actually took the time and I was scrolling. And they were all, I mean, they were pushed all the way to the bottom, and there were a few and they had been posted much earlier, and they were just the typical super fan. Yes, please. I'm ready. Okay. You know, but it was like this many out of this many who were like,
no. And I mean, people were like, you know, hey, as a fellow one woman was like, as a fellow marketing girl myself, knock it off. Yeah. And then other people were like, nope, we already agreed we don't do that here. Right. So like, those are some of the comments. And, you know, I mentioned it in my newsletter. I was like, that's how anti-marketing the vibe is right now. Now, it's not going to be like that forever, right? Everything changes. Yeah. Every social media platform is the result of the people who use it and how they use it. Like we make these ecosystems ourselves. Yeah. But then I was thinking, because I had gone back shortly thereafter, maybe the next day, Lizzie Goddard had a post up that said, people really don't like you selling on here. Got that. Every time I post a sales, like something about sales, I lose followers. And I've also picked up 2 sales. So for what that's worth, right? And so she just had put that, and you know, and she kept through her launch the whole time. And then she did it. I'm in one of her communities, and she kind of did a debrief about the number of sales she picked up through Threads. Katya, meanwhile, same thing. Katya was doing her thing, and she said, yeah, you know, everybody's like, oh, don't sell here, don't sell here. Well, this is who I am. This is how I operate. And already made a sale, and I'm in one of her communities too. And so she was sharing that kind of offline. So here's my thought. So what I've been thinking on is why the difference? Because they all have huge audiences. So Katya's posts had to be seen by as many people as Jenna's. Lizzie's posts had to be seen by at least as many people as Jenna's. So why did everybody like jump on Jenna's post, but they didn't jump on Lizzie and Katya's? And this is my thought.
Okay.
If you look at Jenna's feed, she came in playing around like the rest of us, right? Talking about her kids, talking about this, talking about that. And then she tried to slip in a sneaky little marketing engagement driving post. And that, I think, felt like a bait and switch to people who were following her on Threads, right? It was like, I thought I was getting to know you as a real life human, and then you flipped the script on me. And now you're just trying to market at me. And now I feel betrayed. Whereas Katya and Lizzie came out of the gate exactly like they are on every other platform you're ever going to find them. Not posting the exact same words, but just the same tone, the same impression, the same type of content.
It was consistent. You and I were trading voice messages. I mean, since like a whole week. We're both hoarse. Like we've just been talking and talking. And and I had said early on, like within the first 48 hours, and I was like, I freaking love this app. It's forcing people to human again. And it's showing you how many people don't really know how to be human. And some of
Mm-hmm.
them we weren't surprised about. It's like, I
Okay.
see how wooden you are in every other place, and you kind of sometimes kind of struggle, even if they have really large audiences and they seem to do well. And then there were other people where it was surprising, like how refreshing it was to see behind the scenes and the person behind it
Mm-hmm.
all. And I think the power of a platform like Threads, which is probably why we all loved Twitter back in the day, is that you could have asynchronous conversation and actually converse with people, which is difficult to do on, I'll just use Instagram because I'm on it all the time. You know, the posts, they used to be, the timeline used to be a timeline, but now, you know, there's an algorithm. And so,
Mm-hmm.
you know, sometimes people don't see all the things you post. People were trying to have conversations directly through feedback, through stories where they would like ask questions. But
Mm-hmm.
Threads is a place where you can actually see other people's responses, just like you would on Twitter, which is nice. I think it's why the LinkedIn crowd also really loves LinkedIn, because they can see the conversation threads in
Mm-hmm.
there. And the thing that I've noticed has been so useful is that I've gotten incredible market research data out of posting behind the scenes from being in LA. We were recording some podcast episodes, and I got feedback from people, which I hadn't thought about. And I'm like, oh, well, there's some bonus episodes for one thing. And also, it informed me on the way my offers are developing, because I'm going through a shift and like retiring my mastermind.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, now what? And, you know, and we had a chance to kind of talk about that. And it was so valuable to have that dialogue going in this online space. And I think the Jenna Kutchers of the world have forgotten that, like, people just really want them to be a human, and they're
Mm-hmm.
tired of worshiping some goddess on the stage kind of thing.
Right.
I think it's more a reflection for her, actually, of sort of the bro marketing crowd that she tends to be more highly affiliated with.
Mm.
Like, she's in the Dean Graziosi, Tony Robbins
Got it.
circles. And I think it's more a reflection of that, which is unfortunate for her, I think. But you know, hey, you know, you pick your side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and the thing is we don't all, I mean, none of us is for everybody, right?
Yeah. Nor should we be.
And exactly. And especially on a new platform. I mean, this is something you and me talked about, right? Is like there is a matter of coming in and observing.
Yeah.
Like you don't need to be the first person to talk. And then wanting to look for ways to fit into the overall discussion.
Okay, hold 1 second. We're freezing again. Am I frozen for you?
You were. So
Okay.
I was like, okay, let me finish this sentence
That was
just in
perfect.
case.
Finishing the sentence is perfect. We'll leave it there. This video is so gonna have a blooper at the end. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be
It's gonna
fun.
be great.
It's gonna be great.
Is this thing on? Are we unmuted?
Oh my God, can I say how tired I was of hearing that? They're like, is this thing on? And I was like, can we come up with a better line walking into a new like, oh God, you guys. God.
Ah, yes. Well, and you know, the other thing that we haven't actually talked about is the way that Threads was launched. I don't know how much people pay attention to certain things, like I do. So tell me if you notice this. So we got to see how brands and influencers are brought into new platforms
Yes.
because most of them did not get more than like a day or two's notice, right? When typically they would have like a month's notice or so.
Well, according to The Verge, as like a news outlet,
Mm-hmm.
reportedly the like celebrity blue check crowd, they were supposed to have like first access, and because they pushed it so early, they basically had like less than 24-hour access, which is why you saw so many celebrities pile on after
Mm-hmm.
normie people went on, you know. And I thought that was real fascinating. So like people with big audiences were going through the same thing we were all going through, posting the same things, like, let me see what happens when I try doing this. And we were all like trying to like, what happens when I do this? What happens when I do that? Because you have to post a certain amount of material in order to see how does it display, what
Mm-hmm.
happens when I do it, you know. And we're watching each other do it, and we're learning the tools. and everyone was on an even
Right.
playing field.
But here's what I think people didn't notice is Meta had staff onboarding these
Yes.
celebrities, right? So I happen to be following without realizing it their partnerships coordinator. And so what they were doing is they were creating, they had a pun post every time they onboarded somebody, right, to welcome them.
Oh, cute.
And then they started like, okay, so I need a good pun to like welcome Lady Gaga. I'm making that up. It was somebody else.
Mhm.
How would you welcome so and so? And it was at the end of day 2, they had onboarded like 264 public figures. And they'd put that, they're like, all right, good, honest day's work done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But I remember like looking at that and just seeing them kind of document it and go, huh. So this is another way that this is genuinely a moment in history. Even if Threads doesn't stick, we have been able to see behind the scenes of an app launch in a way that we've never have before. Because
Yeah.
before, that partnerships manager's job would have been done 2 weeks before the rest of us got access.
Mhm.
You would have gotten access 6 months or 3 months before I did as an Apple user, because I'm an Android user and it always comes to Android last.
Mhm.
Like all of this stuff, this whole experience we've had over the last week will likely never be duplicated.
No, you know me, we were talking about this. I've never been an early adopter. My biggest flex in the social media landscape is probably always going to be Threads, having a number under
Mm-hmm.
1 million, and I'm like, look at me, But the thing that I noticed right off the bat, and I think it was within the first 2 hours, it was right before you got it available in your app
Mm-hmm.
store. And I had already started seeing some trends, and I was like, check this out. Because followers has become this number that people
Mm-hmm.
chase. And the thing I noticed very quickly, because they imported your account over from Instagram, if you already had a large following over there, you benefited greatly from it when you got
Mm-hmm.
onto Threads. And but there's some things on Threads that I think are real interesting. I haven't heard a whole lot of people talking about it, because I always pay attention to like the mental health aspect of what we do in business. And there
Mm-hmm.
were actual studies done because of all the hearings about mental health in teenagers and whatnot and social media. And Meta had that famous, whistleblower from their staff about this. And on Threads, if you pay attention, they have it kind of grayed out how many people are following you. It doesn't show you how many people you're following. It's not like on Facebook or on Instagram or on LinkedIn or anything where you can see those numbers in big, bold color, black font. And you can't do the math. You can't do the comparison. You have to
Mm-hmm.
like actually click on it and go into it and look at it. And it really has de-emphasized this vanity metric, or they're attempting to really, which I thought was really, really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think honestly, a healthy move, you
Yeah.
know? I think it was a healthy move. I feel like, and I don't know about you, but like I feel like I've seen more of my clients and audience who have come over seem to jump into the discussion a little quicker and ease up on it. And I don't think that they're looking at that and recognizing it and saying, oh, that's what makes me feel more comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that subconsciously it contributes to a feeling of being more welcome and not having that feeling of being like, oh, I'm such a tiny fish in this pond. Like, who am I to, have a discussion? Because you and I hear this all the time from people where we're like,
Right.
ask your audience, get out there, just talk to them. Like, even if one
Mm-hmm.
person responds, that's more data than zero.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen some people who've like had some, very fruitful conversations, or they're just like actually exercising their voice for the first time.
Right.
And that's huge.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and I think, we've seen some intentional things, right? You can't see how many people other people are following.
Yeah.
You can only see how many followers they have.
Yep.
So you don't have to worry about this. Like, well, what if I'm really just on this platform because it's an easy way for me to digest news and I want to follow 50 different news outlets and
Mhm.
I don't want to follow my Aunt Mary?
Right.
Like, right? It's like nobody knows.
Yeah.
And so that's freeing. Because the first day I followed every single news outlet because I am such a news junkie. And then by day 3, I was like, I would like to actually see stuff from people I know. So I had to stop following all these news outlets.
Well,
And
the
by the way,
news,
they all write the same stories. So it's like I
they
didn't
do.
actually need to follow 50 of them. Like 2 is good.
Well, I mean, you bring up a couple of things here. The first one
Mhm.
is on the news outlet front. Meta has like this kind of contentious relationship with the news outlets. And if they're really going to take over Twitter, the whole like behind the scenes business chatter is like they're going to have to make amends with news outlets and like
Mhm.
stop deprioritizing them in whatever algorithm they are currently building. So that's an interesting thing to see what happens there. But I love that you said, like, I already see there's so much redundancy. Like, why do I keep following the same
Mhm.
thing? And I think one of the great things about threads and that you can like exercise with your business buddies to practice doing it
Mhm.
is to find your own authentic voice because people who just spout, the typical like sales pitchy stuff, the reason
Mhm.
why they're not doing well is because it's like I've heard these statements before. Does this thing keep you up at night? Have I told you about this solution? And it's like, nope, no, everybody knows that formula. Nobody wants to hear it. They want
Mhm.
to hear who you are. They want to hear from you. And I feel like genuinely people are ready to see the human side of all these different people offering services and brands. It's probably why some people have made sales already. It's like people actually get to know, like, and trust by seeing
Mhm.
you. And the reason why someone like Jenna Kutcher falls flat is because you can share little quips about your kids all day long, but if you bait and switch like that, it's clear that that's not really you. I'm not really getting to know you. Now, that doesn't
Right.
mean you have to share everything under the sun and, divulge, personal safety. That's not the point. But people do have to feel like they're actually hearing from you.
Right. Well, and you know what? Who was it? Oh, I'll have to tell you later. But there was somebody who I was catching their conversation today where what they talked about, oh, Dr. Michelle Mazur. If you don't know her, she's
Mm-mm.
super fun. Um, and it's Mazur. I always spell her
Okay.
name wrong. But she was talking about part of what the problem is, part of what we're repulsed by on threads is the formulaic framework of hook, connect, call to action. And she just asked, she's like, how many times have you actually shared a post because it said share this post?
Mm-hmm.
How often have you saved a post because it says save this post? Like, really, like, how often do we follow these calls to action? And if we ourselves, and this was her point, if we ourselves aren't following the calls to action, why do we feel so obligated to put them in all of our posts?
Right.
Right? And you're like, huh. And it was a pretty extensive thread. It ended up including a lot of different voices, but kind of what came down is a lot of the people we consider to be social media experts really have only been successful in growing their own account. And what they teach,
Mm.
what they say is the fast track to success is what worked for them without ever acknowledging, hey, we're talking about 6 years ago. Hey, we're talking about 12 years ago. To your earlier point,
Mhm.
well, what we're really talking about is I had 1 million followers on this sister platform and they were easily ported over for me.
Yes. Yes. There's a lot of that. Oh, and then there was you and I were both kind of chuckling at this. Um, there was some guy, I can't remember now who it was either. Just been looking at so many people's names and words.
Mm-hmm.
And he is a big name. I feel like he was like one of the celebrity entrepreneur types. And he made this post and he's like, all the people who didn't auto follow back, you're dead
Mm-hmm.
to me. And I thought it was such a vulnerable thing for someone like that to post in a way. And I thought, nobody is exempt from the feelings of like, I can't believe you didn't click the radio buttons
Yeah.
because it asks you when you set up your account, do you want to auto follow all the people? Like, just basically import what I have on Instagram. And when people join, that's what will be over here on threads. And they didn't say yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and I've noticed the same trend too. And I thought, well, this is interesting. People are definitely curating their threads differently than Instagram. But I thought, yeah, that is a fair and interesting point where it's like this is a brand new place. to me, I always think of things in terms of like the equivalent of like an in-person event. So it's like I go to a conference
Mhm.
and it would be like pretending like I didn't know the person in front of me and I just keep walking through the conference hall, and it's like, say hi, yo. Like,
Yeah.
and you and I've been chatting within circles of people and like we've seen each other on each of our threads over on, Instagram and then now over on threads and there's a nice quality to that relationship where it's like, oh, we're clearly like actually caring about what somebody's doing for a moment,
Hmm.
for a
Yeah.
moment.
For a moment. And you know what? And like any platform, any app that has multiple contributors, because that's really what social media is. It's like the old school multi-contributor blog, right?
Yeah.
We all have the opportunity to shape what this becomes. So it's going to look different a month from now than it does today.
Yeah.
You and me are likely going to be using it differently. Like, I mean, let's have that bestie conversation. Since you got home and since I got home,
Mm-hmm.
has your usage of threads gone up or gone down?
There's a little bit of a dip because I've been tired.
Right.
And also, there was so much activity when I was in LA. Anybody who follows me on Instagram and or threads would have noticed a big uptick.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny you're asking me this now because I'm like thinking aloud and comparing them. And I'm realizing like the difference in content I put out on both of those platforms. On threads, it was very personal, like
Mm-hmm.
personal thoughts, personal reflections, because I had a space to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And over on Instagram, I made a real point to take a selfie with all the people I was catching up with. Anybody
Mm-hmm.
who had an Instagram account, they got posted.
Yep.
And because there were people that I caught up with from my network who aren't on Instagram or requested, they were like, no, I don't use it. Please don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's this like wall of faces now on Instagram as opposed to threads, which is sort of like these thoughts of like, I'm getting ready to do this, or I, went to
Yeah.
the studio or did that, and because there was so much activity happening, there was a lot of activity happening on the platforms. Now I'm home and there's not all that hubbub going on. So it's
Mm-hmm.
slower. And I'm not sorry about that. Like I think that's a natural thing. I think that when we show up authentically and it's not because there's some, social
Mm-hmm.
campaign person running the thing and it's always about a launch, you really get to see like, oh, this person's busy doing something. The
Mm-hmm.
cool thing is that in these little bursts of like by going to these cities and like recording y'all, there's this burst of activity and people have noticed and they're like, I'm getting DMs over on Instagram. I've got the comments over on threads because you can't DM on threads.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, oh, this is really cool. I had someone who had said no to being a guest on the first season.
And now they regret it, don't
Uh-huh.
they?
Well, they were like, I
Boy, am
really regret
I
this.
boy,
Uh-huh.
am I glad my husband talked me into saying
I
it.
know. I'm so glad he did. I mean, speaking of like this bestie stuff, like
Yeah.
we meet each other online. You and I are not unique in this way. So many of us have known each other through online spaces and to find a way to get together
Mm-hmm.
and bring it into the real world. How many comments did we get? People were like, "Oh my God, you guys are in person." I feel like the world is going into this place where
Mm-hmm.
like we need deeper connection. People are craving it.
Yeah.
They even want to see it in other people. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to be just for them. And I'm happy to be one of those people who can do things like that.
Yeah, well, it was super fun. And I think about it, like when we got into the car, because you drove me to
Uh-huh.
lunch, and we're like, this doesn't even feel like a blind date. Like we're
No.
really friends.
Yeah. Like this isn't weird at all. We were like, for a minute, we were quiet because we were both like, I think you were messaging Brian because he had the
Yeah,
girls and you like letting him know like we're headed now. We had
yeah,
left the studio and I had a bunch of messages on there too. And so we were just like quiet in the car and the car's cooling down because it was a hot weekend in LA. So the car's cooling down, the AC's on. And then it was like, this is the stuff that like good friends do when you can just sit in silence and like do your
yeah.
thing. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Um, yeah, it's I think well, I personally have been channeling a message, this all year
Mm-hmm.
that the more we can people more intentionally and get in front of our people and like talk to them face to face. And in person is
Mhm.
even better. It's not a requirement, but it's even stronger. Like the more we're going to have like this sort of exponential growth in terms of like business network,
Mhm.
but also, it's more than business. Like it's friendship.
Well, and I this is probably where we should leave this, but maybe it's a topic for another video,
Okay.
is we always talk about how lonely entrepreneurship can be.
Yeah.
And like the beauty of this, right, is you can do business and develop friendships along the way that are not competitive.
Yes. Yes. I mean, honestly, your people and my people could and probably should buy all the things that either of us sells.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of being like, oh, but what if there's never that going on.
No, not at all.
And I'm curious to see as we record our conversations and other people watch this as it happens, how that thread continues to
Mm-hmm.
like show up.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah. Oh, okay. We'll leave it there.
All right.
I mean, there's so many things we could talk about threads, but there's also a lot of other content about threads at this point. And
Yeah.
we were
And
like,
we're not trying to be threads experts. That's not what this is
no,
about.
no, but we were like, we do need to have a conversation about it sooner and post it sooner instead of waiting to do it. So thank
Right.
you for doing that.
Thank you.
Tonya, hold on one second. My computer froze. You're still frozen. And I missed the Brian story. You started it and then it froze.
Oh, that's okay. You're like, oh, no, you're back. You were frozen too. I was like,
I was
wow,
frozen
she's
too.
like got a really, it was a really good smile for you.
Oh, thank you. I might include that and leave it in like a blooper at the end.